Well, how's everybody doing out there? Well, welcome to day 3 of Corona Online School. Hopefully, everybody had a great weekend and learned a lot of stuff last time about histograms, bar graphs, and things like that. So, we're going to kind of continue along those same lines, again, looking at different ways to look at data. And so, the things that we want to talk about today are percentiles, quartiles, five number summary, and a box plot, kind of a way to graph our five number summary. So let's kind of dive in real quick. So if you look at the top, we've got like a little example here. So suppose you're applying for law school and you take the LSAT, which is the law school admission test, and you score 155. And so this kind of goes back to like that frequency thing I was talking about. When you've got frequency and you've just got this random number, it doesn't really give you an idea of how it kind of compares to anything. And so same thing with this score. Like what's 155 mean? Is it good? Is it not good? What do you really know? And so normally, like on placement tests and things like, or on like different kinds of tests, they usually have like a percentile rank. You probably see them in high school and stuff like that. And what it does is it tells you how you did compared to everybody else. So that way you can kind of put a meaning to that score. So in this case, if I said that you scored better than 60%, 63% of the people who took the LSAT, then that would give you a better idea of how you did, or if you were in the 95th percentile or something like that. So that's what that percentage is. It's giving you a percentile score that compares your score to other people and allows you to know whether you did good or bad or whatever it is. So these are all what are called measures of position. So the two that we're going to talk about in this case, so I've just mentioned the one, is a percentile, and then the other one is what's called a quartile. So we'll see in a second that a quartile is just a specific percentile, basically just for a certain number. So again, percentiles are exactly what was described above. If you scored 155 on the LSAT, you did better than 63% of the test takers. So we would say that you were in the 63rd percentile for the test. So at least above 50%, which is good. Like now, it depends. Some law schools may not take you unless you're in the top 90, in which case your score wouldn't be that good. But at least it gives you an idea of where you stand. So our definition for percentile. So the percentile of a data point is the percentage of data points that fall below the given one. So again, that 63rd percentile means that there were 63% of the test scores were below that score, is the idea. All right, so let's talk about how to actually calculate percentiles. So in this case, we've got 50 college students were asked how much sleep they got per school night, rounded to the nearest hour. The following frequency table records their results. So we want to find the 28th percentile. So the first thing we want to notice is in this case they gave us that the total number of college students was 50. So if I actually add this up, that would give me 50. If they didn't give me that number, that's the first thing I'd have to do. So I need to know that total, just like if we were doing a relative frequency, we needed to know the total also. So in this case, since it was given, I already had it. If it wasn't, go ahead and add up the frequency so we can figure out what the total is first. And so since we're trying to figure out the 28th percentile, what we do is we take 0.28 multiplied by 50, and in this case that gives us 14. Now be careful, this isn't the score. The 28th percentile isn't 14, and which is good because there's no 14 hours of sleep, so it doesn't actually make sense in this situation. It's the 14th number in the list. So in this case, it's the top score of that 28th percentile. So what we want to do is actually add up from the bottom up what the first 14 numbers would be. So in this case, 4 hours of sleep was 2. There were 5 people that had 5 hours of sleep and 7 that had 6 hours of sleep. So if I add these, I get a 7. 7 and 7 gives me 14. So the 14th score is exactly at the top of the 6 hour mark. But if we want to know if you're greater than 28%, then that means we'd have to go a little bit beyond it. So in this case, that would tell us it's somewhere between 6 and 7. So we would say that it was 6.5 hours. So we're basically just taking 6 plus 7, add them together, divide them by 2, and getting 6.5 hours. So, because the 6 itself was kind of at the very top of the scale. All right, so let's do the same thing for 80th percentile. So again, 0.80 times the total. And so in this case, that gives us a 40. And so again, this is the number on the list. It's not actually the number 40 itself. So again, adding from the bottom up, we've got 14 to there, then 26, and then 14 to this is 40. So again, 40 is at the very end of the 8 hours of sleep. So if we were talking about how much sleep, below 80%, then it would be 40 people had scores or below 8 hours, basically, in that case. But since we're talking about above 80%, then that means it would be somewhere between 8 and 9. So again, we would do the same thing and get 8.5 hours in that case. All right, so finally, let's do 40th percentile. So again, same thing, 0.4 times 50. That gives us a 20. And so in this case, let me erase some of these numbers here. So 20 we can see, so we know this is 14, and if we go up to the next one, we're going to be at 26. So 20 is somewhere dead in the middle of the sevens. So in this case, we don't have to actually average anything. We can just say that to find the 40th percentile, it's going to be 7 hours exactly, because it wasn't at the top or the top of the scale or anything like that. It was kind of dead in the middle. All right. Any questions or anything? All right. Very good. Well, if you have questions, just let me know. All right. So in this case, we want to talk about quartiles. So quartiles are nothing but a specific percentile, and it just splits the data into quarters. So what we're going to talk about is there's going to be the first quartile, which is represented as Q1. And so what that does is it kind of splits the data into the lower 25% and the upper 75%. So in this case, there's going to be, so Q1 is going to be like here. So 25% of the data is going to live down below. 75% of the data is going to live above that quartile. So the next one we're going to talk about is what's called Q2, or sometimes it's called the median. And so it's the place that divides the data completely in half. So the median is the exact middle of the data. So the idea, our Q2, is going to divide the data up so 50% lives below, 50% lives above, in this case. And then finally, Q3, or third quartile, it's kind of like the first quartile, but opposite. So in this case, Q3 would be, say, out here, and we'd have 25% above, 75% below, in that case. All right, so in this case, we want to find each of these different, so we want to find Q1, we want to find the median, or Q2, and then we want to find Q3. Now, there are a couple different ways you can actually do this. So one, to find the median, especially by hand, you definitely have to have your list ordered from lowest to highest. And so to notice in our case, our list is ordered lowest to highest, which is kind of nice. So what you could do to find the median, one way, is you can actually kind of figure out what the middle data is by actually kind of scratching off each ends until you meet in the middle. So for example, in this case, if I kind of tack off the first and the last, and then the next one, 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 and the next one. And so what's going to happen is you're either going to get lucky and you're going to have a single number in this case, or if you don't end up with a single number, you'll end up with a pair of numbers like I have here, which is kind of nice because, again, the median is the exact middle number. But if you have an even number of data points, there is no middle. So like in our case, we've got 20 data points. So I'm going to have 10 to the left, 10 to the right. So the median is actually going to fall in between the 10th and the 11th digit. So in this case, between 62 and 63. So to find our median, what we do is actually average those two values. So take 62 plus 63, add them together, and so I get 125. Divide that by 2, and we end up with 62.5. So that's one way. I kind of like using that as a way to find the median. The other way is you could actually do like we did before. Take 0.25, or not 0.25, 0.5, multiply it by 20, and that gives you 10. So again, that's telling us that the median is between the 10th and the 11th position in this case. So that's another way that you could actually do it in that case. All right, so the quartiles, you can actually kind of do the exact same way that I did the median. So for example, let me erase this real quick. So I know my median is actually living somewhere between this value and this value. So if I did my first quartile, I would actually be looking at the first row. So again, I could actually go through, because technically the first quartile is just the median of that first data set, first half of the data set. And so lo and behold, when I cancel these guys out, I don't end up with an even number again. So my first quartile is again going to live between that 57 and the 58. So just like for the median, I would do the same thing, add 57 plus 58. So that gives me, what, 115. Divide by 2 gives me 57.5. Or if I wanted to use that percentile method, I would do 0.25 times 20, which would give me 5. So again, what it's telling me is that the first quartile is between the 5th and the 6th digit, which is the same thing I did there. That's exactly what I found there. The 5th digit was 57, the 6th digit was 58, and then I had to average them to find my total. So finally, third quartile, same thing. You can either use the 0.75 method or you can use my little scratch out method. If I do the scratch out method, again, I don't end up with a single number. I end up with a pair of numbers. So take 74 plus 75, divide by 2. So we get 149, which gives me 74.5. And again, so it's up to you. If you like using the percentile method to find these guys, that's perfectly fine. If you'd much rather use the scratch-off method, I mean, that totally works too. Again, the main thing you have to remember with the scratch-off method is you want to make sure that your data is actually lined up from lowest to highest. If it isn't, then that's not going to actually work in that case. So it turns out that the 5-number summary that we're actually interested in talking about is the 3 numbers that we just found above. So the first quartile, the second quartile, and the third quartile. And what we actually throw in extra are the min, the smallest value on the list, and the max. So if we actually look at the data above, we saw our Q1 was the 57.5. So let's write it in here. Our median was the 62.5. Our Q3 was the 74.5. And then finally our max was 95, it looks like. And our smallest value was 47. So again, what you want to think about with these guys is, what we're looking at is trying to get an idea of what the data actually looks like, with numbers. So in this case, I can tell that there was no test scores below 47. There wasn't any test scores above 95. And also that I know 25% of the data was between 47 and 57.5. So 25% of the test scores were in that range there. So in this case, from 47.5 up to 62.5, 50% of the test scores were in that range. And then finally, from 47 up to 74.5, 75% of the scores were between those values. And so again, and you can think about it the opposite way. So between 74.5 and 95, 25% of the scores lived there. Between 62.5 and 95, 50% of the scores lived there, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of messing around with these that you can actually do and stuff, which is kind of nice. So now there is a neat little way to use your calculator to actually calculate this 5-number summary as well. So I thought I'd show you that real quick, so that way, if you want to do these a few times in practice, that's totally good, but I'm fine with you actually using the calculator as well. If you don't have a fancy TI calculator, there's some apps you can actually get, and I'm going to actually make something on Google Sheets, so you don't have to actually buy one right away. So I'm going to try to make as much stuff on Excel and Google Sheets and stuff like that that you have access to. So if you don't actually have a calculator, you don't want to buy one, because they're like $150. So if all you're doing is taking this class, I wouldn't go out and spend it. I would kind of use some workarounds. So what I'm going to demonstrate on is actually a calculator app called Graphin Calc. It's pretty nice. It's like last semester they actually put it on sale for free, because the Corona thing was going on. So I actually got mine for free. But it looks like a TI calculator. It works exactly like a TI calculator. Even when it costs money, it's only like $4 or $5. So if you don't mind spending that, it's kind of nice. You can have it on your phone and stuff like that. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to calculate that same 5-number summary that we just did here. So hopefully we get the same answer. So I'm going to use the physics data that we had above, and I'm going to walk you through step by step how to actually calculate this on your calculator. And again, if you don't have a calculator, I'll have it available. I'll have a link for a Google Sheets doc that you can use, and it's real easy to type that in too. All right. So the first thing we want to do is we have to insert our data into the calculator. So hit the Stat button first, and then hit Edit. So at this point, see, I don't have any numbers in mind, and depending on if someone's used your calculator before, there may be numbers in there. So if that's the case, let me put a few numbers in here real quick. If you have numbers in there and you want to get rid of them, all you have to do is just cursor up to where it says L1, hit the clear button, and then enter, and everything will go away. So in that case, again, just go up, hit clear, enter, and it empties the whole table out for you, so that way you don't have to worry about it. So now let me go ahead and type in the numbers. So in this case, 47, 48. So I'm just typing them in, hitting enter. 53, enter. 56, enter. 57, 58, 60, 61, 61, 62, 63, 64, 71, 2, 74, 75, 76, 82, 89, 95. Physics must be hard. There's a lot of bad scores here. So thing to remember is, remember there were 20 test scores in our thing. So whenever you're typing in data, just like with the frequency table, you always want to kind of check and make sure you haven't messed anything up. So if you highlight your last number on your list, notice it's got a little 20 beside it. So that tells me that it's the 20th thing in the list. So that means I haven't forgotten any of the data. Now, I could have typed something in wrong, but at least I've got the right number. So in this case, I'm knocking on wood that I've actually got it right. But all right, so now what we want to do is actually find this 5-number summary. So what we want to do is hit second and mode to quit out of this and go back to the main screen. So now hit stat again, but this time, instead of doing anything with the first list, let's go over to that middle where it says calc. So on mine, I can just touch it. If you've got a TI, you'll have to cursor over and hit enter. And so what I want is I want to hit the very first thing on the list. So 1 var stats. And so in this case, I put everything in list 1. And so typically on your calculator, if it's in list 1, all you have to do is hit enter and it'll give you the data. If you do need to type it in, now if you put it in list 2 or list 3, if you notice on the number 1 button, the number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, number 6, it's got all these different list numbers. So that's how you would access them. So like if I wanted to type in list 1, I would just hit second 1. But I'm pretty sure I don't have to do it. Let me check and see if it gives me an error. Good, so it worked. So as long as you keep your stuff in list 1, all you have to do is hit enter. And so it's going to give you a lot of data. And some of it we are going to use eventually, so I'm not going to talk about it right now. But the very last 5 things that are on your list are actually the 5 number summary. So notice we've got this min x is 47, Q1 is 57.5, the median or Q2 is 62.5, Q3 is 74.5, and then finally the max x is 95. So those numbers sound familiar, so let's check and see. 57.5, 62.5, 74.5. Look at that. We did a good job. So that's it. So, and again, like, get comfortable using that 1 var stats because we're actually going to use it a lot throughout the semester and, and more in this chapter and stuff like that. So if you get stuck, rewind the video, watch it again. If you can't get it to work for whatever reason, message me and let me know so that way I can kind of help you walk through it. Otherwise, this is it for 2.3. There's some practice problems for you guys to work on, so I'm going to leave those for you. So work on those now, and then when you're done, come back for the 2.4 video. Good job.